You already know what you're supposed to do. Spend less than you earn. Invest early. Stop spending money on things that don't actually move your life forward. You've heard it so many times, you could recite it without thinking. Maybe you've even opened the brokerage account and then done nothing with it for 7 months. Not because you forgot. Not because you don't care. Something keeps getting in the way that you cannot name. It's not laziness. It's not a missing piece of information. It's something that was built into you before you were 12 years old. By your family, your household. The unspoken rules about money you absorbed growing up. This episode is about making that visible, naming it precisely, and starting the real process of changing it. Why knowing better is not enough. Think about someone you know, maybe it's you, who understands exactly what they should be doing financially. They know they should contribute to their retirement account. They've watched the videos, read the articles, and they understand intellectually that investing earlier produces dramatically different outcomes than starting later. They know this, and they still haven't set it up, not because they forgot. The intention comes back regularly. Something makes them close the browser tab, leave the form half-filled, tell themselves they'll handle it next month when things are a little more stable. It's been 6 months, 9 months. The intention returns. The action doesn't. This is not a willpower problem. Calling it a willpower problem is like telling someone who keeps falling asleep during the day to just try harder to stay awake, without ever asking whether they're sleeping at night. You're addressing the symptom while ignoring what's actually causing it. The cause, which researchers in financial psychology have documented carefully, is that the decisions that feel like they're being made by your rational adult mind are actually being shaped heavily by a set of beliefs formed before you were 12 years old. Beliefs about what money means, what having it says about you, what not having it means, whether you deserve it, whether wanting it makes you a bad person. Those beliefs were never written down. Nobody handed them to you in a document and said, "Here is what our family believes about money." They were absorbed through the atmosphere of your household, through things that were said and things that were conspicuously never said, through watching what the adults around you did and didn't do with money. And right now, in your 20s or 30s, those absorbed beliefs are operating like software running in the background of every financial decision you make. They influence what you do, what you avoid, what makes you anxious, what makes you spend, and what makes you freeze when you should be acting. Today's episode is about making the invisible visible, about naming the software, understanding where it came from, and starting the process of deciding whether to keep running it. And that process starts here, with understanding exactly what a money script is. The money script, what it is and where it comes from. Dr. Brad Klontz is a financial psychologist whose research on the psychology of financial behavior has been published in peer-reviewed journals, including the Journal of Financial Therapy. In 2011, Klontz and his colleagues published research introducing and formally measuring what they called money scripts. And what they found changed the way financial therapists and researchers think about why people do what they do with money. A money script, in their framework, is a core belief about money that forms in childhood and drives adult financial behavior. And the crucial thing to understand is this: money scripts are not conscious opinions you deliberately chose. They are the implicit operating assumptions your brain uses to make financial decisions quickly, before your rational mind even gets involved. Here's how that works in practice. When your brain faces a financial decision, should I invest this? Should I spend it? Should I avoid thinking about it entirely? It doesn't run a careful cost-benefit analysis every single time. That would be too slow and too exhausting. Instead, it reaches for the most readily available belief about money and uses that belief to generate an emotional signal. This feels right, or this feels wrong, or this feels dangerous. That signal arrives before the rational thinking starts. And in the moment of decision, it's usually stronger. Money scripts form through three channels. The first is direct experience. Growing up in a household where bills were a consistent source of visible stress, where a financial loss changed everything, where money came and went unpredictably, and nobody explained why. The second is explicit messaging. The phrases that got repeated until they became what you simply knew to be true. We can't afford that. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people got there by stepping on somebody. You hear something enough times as a child, and it becomes the baseline truth you don't question. The third channel is implicit modeling, watching behavior without a single word being said about it. A parent who avoided opening mail. One parent who controlled all the money while the other remained deliberately kept out of it. A parent who spent aggressively whenever anxiety got high, or hoarded every dollar from a fear that was never explained to the children watching. All of those experiences got encoded. The result is a money script. A set of beliefs that now run faster than conscious thought, shaping financial behavior from underneath. Klontz and his colleagues identified 4 main types, and each one has a very specific fingerprint in how it shows up in your actual behavior. Money avoidance. Wanting money makes me a bad person. The first type is money avoidance, and it is more common than most people expect. The belief at the center of this script is that money is morally suspect, that wealth corrupts, that people who care too much about money are shallow or greedy, or they acquired what they have in ways that involved compromising something important, that there is something more dignified, more honest about not having much. This script often forms in households where money was a consistent source of tension, or where religious or cultural messages connected wealth to greed, or where the family identity was built around being ordinary, hardworking people, not the kind of people who pursue money aggressively. Here's the part that makes this script easy to miss. You can have a money avoidance script without being consciously aware of it. Most people running this pattern would not describe themselves as having negative feelings about money. They'd describe themselves as not caring about money, as valuing experiences over possessions, as being above materialism. But behavior tells a different story. Someone running a strong money avoidance script may unconsciously overspend every time their bank balance gets too high, because having too much sitting there makes them genuinely uncomfortable, even guilty. They might turn down raises or promotions because the additional income comes with additional visibility, and that visibility brings association with the kind of person the script says they don't want to be. They might give money away compulsively, not from genuine generosity, but from a need to not let it accumulate. Or they may avoid engaging with their finances entirely, never checking the balance, never building a plan, letting money pass through their life without any real relationship with it. The particular difficulty here is that this script often coexists with genuine financial intelligence. A money avoider can know exactly what they should be doing. The script just makes doing it feel wrong every time, like becoming someone they don't respect. Recognizing the pattern is the first step. And understanding where it came from, which we'll get to, is what makes it possible to examine whether it still applies to who you are now. The second type is in many ways the opposite of money avoidance, and it may be the most exhausting one to live with. Money worship. More money will finally fix everything. The second type is money worship. The belief at the center of this script is that money is the solution to all problems. That if you could just reach the next income level, earn a little more, save a little more, finally get to a number that feels like enough, the anxiety would lift, the security would arrive, and you'd be able to breathe. The specific number keeps moving. At $50,000, it was $80,000 that would do it. At $80,000, it became $120,000. Reach $120,000, and the goalpost quietly shifts again. and the anxiety doesn't change. It can't change because the belief operating underneath is based on a false premise that a feeling of safety can be permanently stored in an account balance. This script often forms in households where money was genuinely scarce and the scarcity was genuinely frightening, where financial problems created real consequences in the marriage, in the family, in the daily life of the children watching all of it unfold. In that context, the belief that more money means more safety made complete sense. It was probably even accurate. The problem is that the belief doesn't update when the circumstances do. The person running a money worship script can be earning well, saving consistently, and objectively financially secure by any reasonable standard, and still feel the same low-level financial anxiety they felt as a kid listening to their parents fight about bills. The account balance changes. The underlying emotional state doesn't. The behavioral fingerprints are recognizable. Working hours that nobody around you asks about anymore, because they've stopped expecting you to change. Taking every available income opportunity, not because the work is meaningful, but because turning it down feels financially irresponsible. A persistent, low-level anxiety that can't quite be explained given the actual numbers on the page. A vague sense that relaxing, financially, emotionally, is something you'll be allowed to do someday, just not quite yet. The script was formed in real fear, but the fear is no longer an accurate read of your present situation. And no amount of money resolves a belief that money resolves fear, because the script regenerates the fear at every income level. The third type shares some of this anxiety, but it expresses itself very differently in what you buy and what that buying is actually meant to accomplish. Money status. My net worth is my self-worth. The third type is money status. And in the 22 to 35 demographic specifically, this one has an exceptionally strong hold. The belief at the center of this script is that what you own communicates what you are worth as a person. What you spend on, where you live, what you drive, what you wear, where you eat, signals something about your character, your success, your value. Financial appearance and personal worth aren't just connected. In this script, they're essentially the same thing. This script often forms in households where financial appearances were actively maintained, where how the family looked to others genuinely mattered. Or, and this one surprises people, it forms in households where financial struggle had to be hidden, where the shame of not having money led to careful, constant performance of financial adequacy. Either way, the lesson that gets encoded is the same. What your money situation looks like to the outside world determines something essential about your worth. The behavioral fingerprint is spending patterns that consistently run ahead of income, not from recklessness, but because the spending is doing a specific psychological job. It's maintaining a self-image that the script says must be maintained. When lifestyle inflation keeps happening regardless of your stated intentions, and you can't fully explain why, the money status script is usually the mechanism underneath. Social media doesn't create this script. It was being written long before Instagram existed, but it provides a constant, real-time comparison engine that keeps activating it. When you can see what everyone in your network is buying, wearing, living in, and traveling to, the script that connects visible financial success to personal worth gets activated continuously. Identifying this doesn't mean the aspiration itself is wrong. Wanting a good life is not a disorder. But wanting a good life and needing to signal it externally are different things. One comes from genuine values. The other comes from a childhood belief that what you look like financially determines what you're actually worth as a person. That belief can be examined. You don't have to keep accepting it as true just because it runs loudly. The fourth type looks nothing like the first three, but in some ways it's the most deceptive because it's the one most likely to fool you into thinking it isn't a problem at all. Money vigilance. Spending money on myself is irresponsible. The fourth type is money vigilance. And this one is the hardest to recognize because it so often looks like a virtue from the outside. The belief at the center of this script is that money should always be saved, that spending on anything non-essential is irresponsible, that financial security requires constant watchfulness, that enjoying money is dangerous because something could always go wrong, and when it does, you need to have resources available. This script often forms in children of parents who lived through genuine financial hardship. Not ordinary financial stress, real hardship. Economic collapse, sudden job loss, a medical emergency that wiped out everything the family had built. In those circumstances, the vigilance was completely justified. The frugality was the right response. It was adaptive behavior to a genuinely difficult environment. The problem is that it gets transmitted to the next generation as a script. And in the next generation's circumstances, it may not be accurate at all. The person running a strong money vigilance script might have $80,000 saved in a checking account, not invested, in a checking account earning essentially nothing. Because moving it into investments feels like gambling, like surrendering the only thing standing between safety and disaster. They find it genuinely difficult to spend money on something purely enjoyable. A vacation feels reckless. A nice dinner for no occasion is hard to justify. The account balance keeps growing, and the emotional state doesn't change, because the script regenerates anxiety faster than the savings can ever resolve it. The distinction that matters here is between vigilance and conscious frugality. Frugality is a values-based choice. Vigilance is anxiety-driven. One comes from deliberately deciding what actually matters to you and allocating your resources accordingly. The other comes from a fear that was encoded by watching the world feel genuinely financially unsafe. And that fear is still running the show, regardless of what the numbers actually say. If you track every dollar carefully and still feel financially unsafe at a level that doesn't match your actual situation, this is worth examining. The numbers may be fine. The script may simply be making them feel otherwise. The question now is where any of these patterns actually came from and how they ended up running your decisions without you ever consciously choosing them, where your script actually came from. Here's something that might be immediately obvious once it's said clearly. Your money script almost certainly did not originate with you. You didn't arrive at your beliefs about money through careful, deliberate analysis. You absorbed them, mostly before you had the cognitive capacity to evaluate them or consciously decide whether to accept them. And the experience that encoded the script made complete sense at the time it happened. These scripts are not irrational. They were the accurate, adaptive response of a child to their actual financial environment. The problem is that they don't automatically update when the environment changes. Money scripts tend to form through three kinds of experiences. The first is what we can call chronic scarcity formation. Growing up without financial security, where money is a consistent source of stress, where needs sometimes go unmet, where abundance is never part of the picture, creates scripts as protective responses. Money avoidance as a way of not wanting what can't be had. Money vigilance as a way of holding tightly to what little exists. Money worship as a belief that enough money would finally make the uncertainty stop. Those responses were adaptive in that specific environment. The difficulty comes when the environment changes and the scripts don't. The second pattern is family modeling without explanation. If money was never discussed openly in your household, if financial stress was communicated through tension and silence rather than through conversation, if parents managed the finances behind closed doors and kept children entirely out of it, you learned a script without ever receiving context. Money is something adults are stressed about. Money is something you don't discuss. Money is something that causes conflict. You encoded those lessons without being told why, without any framework for understanding what was actually happening. The third pattern is the single defining event. A parent who lost a job suddenly. a business that failed, a medical emergency that depleted everything the family had. These events can encode a money script in a single experience that then runs for decades. Not because the person decided to hold on to the belief, but because the event was significant enough that the brain treated it as the most important piece of evidence it had ever received about how money actually works. Understanding this is not an invitation to blame your parents or to feel bad about your history. They were running their own scripts, almost certainly inherited from their own parents, without being any more aware of it than you are right now. The goal is to trace the belief back to its origin, so that when you look at it, you're looking at it as information about a specific context, not as permanent truth about how life works. The script was formed in a context. That context may no longer exist, which means the script may no longer be accurate. But here's what most people do when they learn this, and why it still doesn't change their behavior. They recognize the pattern, nod in understanding, and then try to fix it with more information about what they should be doing differently. The gap between knowing and doing, let's be precise about why information doesn't fix this. You can know something completely and accurately in your conscious, rational mind and still have the belief layer underneath running an entirely different program. The knowledge sits in one place. The belief generates behavior from another. And in the moment of actual decision, the emotional signal from the belief layer is faster and stronger than the rational argument. Here's how it looks in practice. Take someone who knows, correctly, accurately, that investing in a diversified index fund over a 30-year period is one of the most reliable ways to build long-term financial security. This is not a controversial claim. They've read it. They believe it intellectually. They could explain it to someone else. And yet every time they actually sit down to move money from their checking account into a brokerage account, something happens. An anxiety rises. A thought appears. What if I need this money soon? What if something goes wrong and I can't get to it? What if this is exactly the wrong moment to do this? The action gets deferred. It happens again next month, and the month after. This is not irrational behavior. It's the accurate emotional output of a money vigilance or money avoidance script running exactly as designed. The knowledge about index funds exists in the rational brain. The anxiety is coming from the belief layer. And in the moment of decisions, the emotional signal is consistently stronger than the intellectual argument. That's not a character flaw. That's how the system works, when the belief layer and the knowledge layer are running different programs. This explains the self-blame loop that a lot of people in their late 20s and early 30s run quietly. They know what they should be doing. They're not doing it. The most available explanation is, I must lack discipline. I must not really care. Something must be wrong with me. None of those conclusions are accurate. They're just the most available story when you don't know that there's a belief layer operating underneath, and that the belief layer, not willpower, is what's actually making the decision in that moment. The accurate framing is this. You have a set of beliefs about money that generate a specific emotional response in specific situations, and that emotional response is overriding your rational knowledge in the moment the decision is made. That is a completely different problem than discipline, and it has a completely different solution. The first step toward that solution is identifying your own script precisely. Not in general terms, but specifically enough to see exactly where it's showing up in your behavior. The script identification exercise. What follows is not a clinical assessment. It's a structured reflection designed to surface the core belief driving your most persistent financial behavior. The goal is not a vague general sense of what type of script you might have. The goal is a specific, named belief that you can actually examine and work with. Answer these questions in writing, not just in your head, on paper, or in a document. The act of writing forces a precision that thinking about it doesn't. It makes the belief visible in a way that's hard to avoid. The first question: what is your earliest memory involving money? Not a general impression of your financial childhood, a specific memory, a scene. What was happening, who was there, what was said, how it felt to be in that moment. The second question: what did the adults in your house communicate, through words or through behavior, about what money means? What did having it mean? What did not having it mean? What was the atmosphere in the room when money came up? The third question: when you think right now about checking your bank balance, not actually looking at it, just thinking about doing it, what emotion comes up first? Anxiety, dread, guilt, apathy, something else? Name it as specifically as you can. The fourth question: what financial behavior do you most want to change but keep not changing? Not a general category, the specific behavior. The one that comes to mind when you're honest with yourself about where your financial life keeps not going the way you intended. The fifth question: complete this sentence with the very first thing that comes to mind before you edit it. Rich people are. Don't refine it. Write the first word or phrase that appears. The patterns in your answers point directly to your dominant script. A strong negative charge in that last answer. Rich people are greedy. Rich people are out of touch. Rich people got there by taking advantage of someone. Points toward money avoidance. Answers centered on fear, on the precariousness of whatever you currently have, on a sense that security is always just out of reach. Point toward vigilance or worship. Answers focused on what others think, on the importance of maintaining a certain image, on the need to look a specific way financially. Point toward status. Once the pattern is visible, you can name it. And naming it is the diagnosis. What comes next is the actual work. Rewriting the code, a 3-step protocol. This is not affirmations. It is not motivational self-talk. What follows is a structured cognitive process based on the same framework used in clinical financial therapy. The same approach that underlies evidence-based treatment for the maladaptive financial behaviors that Klontz and other researchers study and address. The first step is to name the belief out loud, completely and specifically. State the exact belief, where it came from, and how it shows up in your actual behavior. The full thing without softening it. Something like, I believe that people who pay close attention to money become greedy and lose sight of what actually matters. I learned this from the way my father talked about people who earned more than we did, with contempt, like there was something wrong with them. It shows up in my life as a tendency to avoid tracking my spending, to leave money in accounts I don't look at, because engaging carefully with my finances makes me feel like I'm becoming someone I don't want to be. That level of specificity is the whole point. A vague recognition, I guess I have some complicated feelings about money, doesn't produce behavior change. A precisely named belief with a clearly identified origin and a specific behavioral fingerprint does. It gives you something concrete to examine. The second step is to interrogate the evidence, not rhetorically, as a genuine inquiry. You believe that people who care closely about money become greedy. Okay, name 3 people you genuinely respect, people whose character you actually admire, who are also financially secure. Look at them. Do they match the prediction the script makes? Does carefully managing money necessarily produce the outcome the belief predicts? When examined directly, money scripts are almost always built on overgeneralizations from a small number of early experiences. One parent's behavior becomes what financially successful people are like. One family's relationship with money becomes what money does to people. When you look at the full range of evidence available to you, not just the experiences that confirmed the script, the generalization rarely holds up. The third step is to build a replacement belief that you actually believe. Not a phrase you borrowed from somewhere else. Not a statement you feel you should endorse. A statement that is both true and more useful than what you've been running. Managing my money carefully does not make me greedy. It makes me someone who can take care of the people I love and contribute to the things I actually care about. That has to be a statement you can verify with your own experience and your own values. If the replacement feels forced, find a smaller version you can genuinely stand behind and start there. The script was formed over years. Revising it takes time and repetition. But every time you name the belief, examine the evidence, and consciously reach for the replacement, you are doing real work on the code, and the code changes. And one of the most powerful sources of raw material for that work is a conversation that most people never think to have. The family conversation no one has. Here's the most direct source of information about where your money script came from, and almost no one uses it. The people who transmitted the script to you in the first place. Most families, across most cultures, do not talk openly about money. It's one of the most consistently avoided topics in household conversation, more taboo in many homes than politics, religion, or health. Money gets discussed in moments of crisis and avoided at all other times. The result is that entire belief systems pass across generations entirely through atmosphere and implication, without a single direct conversation ever happening about what the family actually believes, what they've been through, or why they relate to money the way they do. You can change that with one question. What was money like in your house when you were growing up? Not confrontational, not accusatory, genuinely curious. The answers to this question, from a parent, a grandparent, an older sibling, very often surface the exact financial experience that your money scripts were formed in response to. The period of hardship that was never spoken about. The loss that changed everything. The cultural or family belief about wealth that got transmitted to you, not through conversation, but through behavior, tension, and unspoken rules. When you know the origin, the script becomes less personal. It stops feeling like something inherently wrong with you and starts looking like inherited code, a response that made complete sense in the context where it was created, still running in a context where that context no longer applies. There's a second question that often makes this conversation easier and produces even more useful answers. What do you wish someone had told you about money when you were my age? This reframes the conversation from excavation to collaboration. It asks for wisdom rather than accounting. People are usually far more willing to share what they wish they had known than to explain or justify the financial decisions they made when they were scared, stretched, and doing the best they could with what they had. You may not get completely open answers. Some family members will deflect or minimize or genuinely not remember in a way that's useful. But asking the question genuinely once opens a door that's likely been closed your entire life. Even a partial answer tells you something real. What you do with what you learn, that's what the final chapter is about. Designing your financial identity. You didn't choose your money script. It was given to you, installed by your environment before you had the capacity to evaluate it, question it, or refuse it. But you are in the process of choosing your next one, whether consciously or not. Every financial decision you make is either running the old code or beginning to build something new. There is no neutral position here. The only real question is whether that choice is happening deliberately. The concept of a deliberate financial identity, a consciously chosen set of beliefs about money that align with your actual values and your actual goals, is the lasting alternative to inheriting your parents' relationship with money by default. And building it starts with 3 steps you can take this week. The first step is to write down your 3 currently active money beliefs, not the aspirational ones, the real ones, the ones visible in your actual behavior, not in your intentions. If you avoid looking at your bank balance, one of your active beliefs is probably that knowing will feel worse than not knowing. If you overspend every time your savings starts to build, one of your active beliefs is probably that having money accumulate makes you uncomfortable in a way you haven't fully named yet. Write the real ones. not the version you'd want someone else to see. The second step is to ask one question about each belief. Do I endorse this? Not, is it understandable? It probably is understandable, given where it came from. But is this the relationship with money I am choosing to have going forward? Cross out the ones that don't belong to the person you are in the process of becoming. The third step is to pick one financial behavior to change this month that is consistent with a belief you're consciously choosing, not the whole system. One behavior. If the belief you're building is, I can manage my money carefully without becoming someone I don't respect, the behavior might be setting up an automatic transfer of any amount, $50, $100, into a savings or investment account this week. Small, specific, aligned with the identity you're choosing. The reason this matters more than motivation or willpower is what the research on identity-based behavior change consistently shows. Action drives belief more reliably than belief drives action. You don't have to fully believe the new script before you start acting from it. You act as if you do, in small and specific ways, and the belief follows the behavior over time. The financial life you have right now is largely the output of beliefs you didn't choose. The financial life you'll have in 10 years is the output of beliefs you are choosing, or not choosing, right now. This is where that choice actually gets made. Let me bring the whole episode together before you go, because each chapter gave you something you can actually use. We started with the recognition that knowing what to do with money and actually doing it are two different problems, and the gap between them is not discipline. It's belief. We defined money scripts as the core beliefs formed before age 12 that shape financial decisions faster than your rational mind can respond. We walked through the 4 types. Money avoidance, the belief that wanting money makes you a bad person. Money worship, the belief that more money will finally bring the security you're looking for. Money status, the belief that your financial appearance determines your personal worth. And money vigilance, the belief that spending anything beyond what's necessary is irresponsible. We examined where those scripts come from: chronic scarcity, absorbing family modeling without explanation, or a single financial event that changed the household's relationship with money for years. We looked at the gap between knowing and doing, why information doesn't change behavior when the belief layer generates a stronger emotional signal in the moment of decision. We gave you a 5-question exercise to surface your own dominant script. We walked through a 3-step process for beginning to rewrite it: naming the belief precisely, interrogating the evidence, building a replacement you can actually stand behind. We talked about the one family conversation most people never have and 2 questions that can open it. And we closed with a framework for choosing a deliberate financial identity: the beliefs you run by design, not by inheritance. If something in this episode helped you name something you couldn't quite name before, share it with one person who's stuck in the same loop. That's honestly the most useful thing you can do for this channel. More episodes on the psychology behind the financial decisions that actually matter are coming. Stay close.